I think that I should tell this story. I mean, I've been thinking that I should do it, but I still haven't really done it. I thought I did at one point, maybe on the other channels I used to have, but probably not. If anything, I just mentioned Job Corp since that's where I met this person, but I don't even really know if I should say that much because I don't want to give too much info. Which, well, no, let me not even say all that because I don't even want to go somewhere else. But yeah, so this is going to be about a boy I met who had somewhat recently turned 18, but he had been homeless for a while. Like, I think since getting out of military school or something, because after he got out of military school, his mom moved and didn't tell him where she moved to. And he said he'd been living in abandoned buildings and stuff. And so, yeah, anyway. This is a boy who was trafficked by his family and had a lot of cognitive dissonance, denial, and a whole bunch of things. I'm trying to figure out where to even start. I already know nobody's going to believe this, which, I mean, that's not even what I care about because, for one, something that I learned a while ago is that you should never be feeling like you're living life to prove something to people. Because honestly, the only reason that people don't believe certain stuff is because they're brainwashed and lying to themselves and are in denial about everything that actually goes on to be able to go to sleep at night, which is still stupid to me and always will be, because the thing is, if people would stop playing all these games and idolizing the people running these systems and actually step up and say, stop this, none of these things that happen would happen. And you wouldn't have to lie to yourself to be able to go to sleep at night and all that stuff. But anyway, anywho. So, trying to think of where to even start, because this dude had a crazy story. We had some similarities because we both had been in the Cash for Kids system, even some of the same branches. But of course, there's always going to be some differences. I guess I'll give a summary, then I'll start like going into things. So, he was trafficked by his mafia family, or at least maybe not even full-blown mafia, but he was like a couple different European ethnic groups, and so his dad was tied into a lot of what do they call them, mobs or something, or mafia type stuff. And so basically his dad was a criminal, his dad was friends with other criminals, and so he would traffic his son to different places to go commit crimes with or without him, and make his son go do all these crazy jobs that would even be like borderline sex trafficking type things because of some of the things that he had to do to quote unquote lure people in. And so his dad was also in the US military, which there's a lot I could say about that. A lot that I could say about that. Oh my gosh. The military is just really messy. His dad made child sexual abuse imagery, and the son was actually the one to stumble across it, and then he had to like see the hundreds of DVDs of all the stuff that his dad was doing to these kids. He never mentioned where the kids were actually at. I have a lot of guesses. One of them is maybe like kids in some country that he was going to do whatever military stuff. But I mean, of course, it could just like, well, I don't know. I don't know how much ties the military really has with like sex trafficking. Obviously, the CIA and stuff has ties with that, but I've never really heard anybody say that stuff with the military. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised as far as like the higher ups. I mean, it's not really surprising because I mean the people in the military. It sounds like being in prison, to be honest, with all the sexual abuse stuff that goes on with the people with the, what are they called, the soldiers or whatever. It almost sounds like prison type stuff. Some of the horror stories I've heard from people who were in there, even the cases that came out from the people who died in the military or were killed for trying to report their essay. But yeah, so there was it. His mom had found out about the child sexual abuse imagery that the dad had on his computer, and she called the police on him, but she also tried to delete a whole bunch and did delete a lot to lower his sentence. Then his dad was in military jail. His uncle and his dad would sexually abuse him. He also went through some religious trauma with the pagan Roman Catholic Church, and then some type of ritual to summon something. Then he was almost dragged into becoming a part of some Islam. I don't even know if I could say these words without this being flagged. Some terrorist group or something. It was a lot of stuff. Early childhood for him. He what was it? He had a speech impairment and he started talking he started talking early, and so then he got the autism label. And then his mom treated him bad because of that, and then she put him in special ed because he had a speech impairment and she felt some type of way about that. So the autism label is used against him. I'm not really telling this in order like I should be, but it was a lot of stuff, to be honest. And I mean, it kind of just goes to show that, like, a lot of stuff can happen, and people only make it up because of cognitive, not even the cognitive dissonance. That's not even what I was meaning to say. Kind of that too. But I mean, it's good to get over that because cognitive dissonance can make you lose your mind, just like how accepting the reality can make you lose your mind and go in, what is it called, a psychotic break or whatever. But the repressed memories, I would talk to him about the different things that happened, and like, he almost broke out of all the cognitive dissonance he had, and even admitted a couple times that his mom was a narcissist, and that he would say that, but then he'd be like, but no, these things couldn't have really happened. My parents couldn't have really done that to me. And that also has something to do with like the different spirits that come in with the fractures of the soul that happens in trauma. And so, along with your double-mindedness from like the trauma and the brain damage, the spirits that come can also cause all the double-mindedness and other issues, obviously. And so, like, there's a lot I can say about that, but I really don't want to go into something else. Because I was gonna say that the demons could like whisper in people's ears about how it's all in their head, just like how the abusers would do. Because of course, the inner voices that people commonly have from like trauma are just spirits repeating to them the same thing that their abusers would say. And then there's also other situations that don't really have much to do with this, where people like get multiple personalities, quote unquote, which is the spirits that come in from trauma, and then the spirits, or the quote unquote multiple personalities, will tell the person that they're their friend and that they came to protect them from their abuse. And so these are the spirits that will take over, and they'll take over when the person's going through whatever type of abuse, and the person will go to like they'll go into their mind or soul, and they'll like blank out, and the spirit will take over, and so the person won't have to experience the abuse. And something similar to this is also done in MK Ultra, which there's lots of different types of that, because like I may have said on here, there's a lot of different types of trauma-based mind control. And I could say so much about this. There's the Virgo Vasal / sodomy rituals, which is also called, which is also referred to as turning people out. In slavery, this type of trauma-based mind control was called buck breaking. Willie Lynch syndrome is also a type of trauma-based mind control. What was the other ones? There's a lot of types. There was beta sex kitten programming, all this stuff kind of revolves around sexual abuse pretty much. Because, I mean, all forms of abuse are going to be a demonic ritual. All sex outside of a marriage covenant with the male and female, if it revolves around the sodomy, which is anal and oral sex, that's all going to be a demonic ritual. And so these things fracture the soul, which is something that I could go in details about, but then I'll be way somewhere else, and then I won't be, like, talking about the point of this video. So, this boy was, really broken. For one, he felt like he was losing his mind or even was developing schizophrenia from all his trauma, which, of course, like I said in other videos, all mental illness comes from trauma. And what else did I say? It was something specific. Certain mental illnesses or mental labels or off branches of CPTSD. I mean, like I said, they're all trauma, but like certain ones are like really, really close to CPTSD. So like personality disorders, schizophrenia, bipolar, something else that I don't remember. Other ones specifically come from like sexual trauma. So that would be labels like D.I.D, which is really common in people who went through different forms of trauma-based mind control, which doesn't even have to be intentional. The thing is, when you have certain abusers around you who have given themselves over to the dark side and have a reprobate mind, and are just letting demons work all through them and like rarely ever have control over themselves, like they're their self for one good second, then the rest of the day they're being chaotic and causing constant arguments over stupid stuff like how to tie your shoe. People like that, they I don't even know what I was about to say. Oh yeah, people like that are demonic agents, and they're just literally doing the will of whatever spirits are working through them. And so they could be taking you through basically trauma-based mind control without knowing it. And people think that has something to do with LSD and all this other bull crap. Honestly, the LSD documentaries that came out, that's just low-level cover-up stuff to put in people's faces so the government can say, well, I admitted to you what happened, and then call it a day. But that's all bull crap, because honestly, the deeper levels of it are way worse than giving somebody some LSD. In fact, the types that are usually done don't even revolve around giving people drugs, really. I mean, sometimes it can, but like, it usually just revolves around stuff that can break down the soul, which of course doing drugs can, because the quickest way to losing your mind is prostitution and doing drugs, or just those two things together. Because for one, having sex with a lot of different people, every time you have sex with somebody, you marry them in the spirit realm. And so then also along with that, you become one soul or flesh or whatever. So their DNA goes into you, yours goes into them. You get bits of their personality. And so then you have multiple different personalities. You also get sexually transmitted demons from the people. And a whole bunch of other things that break you down. So what point was I getting to with this? Okay, wait a minute. I don't even remember what point I was getting to. But yeah, so all that can be trauma-based mind control. It doesn't have to revolve around drugs. But drugs and sexual abuse or just having sex with a lot of different people go hand in hand with losing your mind. I think the end point I was supposed to get to was that D.I.D, schizophrenia, and bipolar disorder commonly comes from sexual abuse, depending on what spectrum of schizophrenia, because of course there's this one spectrum that I call a schizonarc, which is kind of like when you okay, wait a minute. When you go into like a victim complex and becoming bitter and getting a reprobate mind, and then you lose your mind because of a victim complex. That's like one spectrum of schizophrenia, which is kind of like the same way you would become a quote-unquote narcissist, which is a person with the Jezebel spirit, Leviathan, and other marine spirits. And Yeah. So, last thing I had to say about that, as far as the bipolar label, like I said in other videos, I've never met somebody who actually had bipolar, because of course that label is just thrown around. Most people with the label don't really have it. They just like are really traumatized from sexual abuse and other things, and so they sometimes like get mad, quote unquote, easily. So, dang it, my voice is cracking. I don't even know what to say about that. Kind of feel like I've been losing my voice over the past couple years. But to get back to the point, no. Was I even done with the last sentence? I do this every single video. I should have just wrote a script, then I would have focused more on what I was actually supposed to be talking about. I don't know. I guess I'm just gonna go back and forth in the circles like usual. So back to the boy though. Back to that. So he felt like he was becoming schizophrenic because of all his trauma. And it makes sense because I mean, when you go through certain things, you're gonna want to become double-minded. Because to be honest, losing your mind is a process, and sometimes people purposely give their minds over and go into like this deep part in themselves where while they're mostly dissociated and they have no control over themselves, and they give up control of themselves to whatever spirits or whatever they came through the trauma, while they are in some part of their mind or soul or whatever, because it feels easier, to be honest, sometimes to lose your mind or give yourself over and not be present than to actually deal with all the stuff that's happened. And I honestly do worry about him because I think he's living with his mom again, and he finally found out where she lives. But yeah, so trying to get back to the point. It's like I remember little bits and pieces because I mean, this point in time became a repressed memory for me, to be honest. So it's like I remember some stuff about it, but trying to remember it in order. So one thing is that he had this one friend. Actually, no. When he was sent to military school. So after a while of him being trafficked and abused and all that stuff by his parents claimed that he was, well, no, wait a minute. That and him being shipped off to go live with other people. So like he was poor sometimes, but then that there's this one point where he was sent to go live with these people who had a lot of money. He wouldn't really go into detail on what that situation actually was. So I can only imagine what all actually happened with that. But he said the house was like a mansion, and then there was some other stuff with that. Then he was sent back home with his mom and dad, or mom or whatever. And then he was told he was quote unquote getting bad. So then he was sent to another part of the Cash for Kids system, which the first part was when he got that mental label of autism/Asperger's because he spoke early and he had a speech impairment. Then he was put in the special ed part of the Cash for Kids system. So actually, that's two parts of the Cash for Kids system first. And then, well, I mean, the third thing could probably be the trafficking. Then the fourth thing would be when he was sent to the military school, which is a part of the Cash for Kids system. So military schools kind of go along with boarding schools, and then TTIs. Some TTIs anyway, because a lot of TTIs are like ranches. But that happened. They would be forced to sleep on the cold floor in hallways with no blankets, kind of like what CPS was doing to the kids in one state, where they had the kids sleeping in hallways on the floor with no blankets, and the floors were like, what's that stuff? Marble? That cold stuff that's like freezing cold. And then their excuse was because they had low funding. But yeah, so they had them doing that. Can only imagine what else happened, because of course when you go into the military, they scream at you and break you down and force you into conforming. Hopefully that came out right. So all that happened. Wouldn't be surprised if there was some sexual abuse too, because that's really common in these types of situations. And he was in there for a long time. He spent like most of his life in military school, I'm pretty sure, other than when he was being trafficked by his family. So he made it to 11th grade in military school, and then he was finally allowed to leave. And he told me about this girlfriend he had at one point in time, but he ended up breaking up with her because the criminal stuff that was going on with his family was like really dangerous, and he didn't want her to be caught in the midst of that. Oh yeah, then this other thing. He had told me about this kid that was sent to military school because he was really smart, but his parents were like poor or whatever, or something like that. Or they just didn't like him like the usual. Well, I don't even know if they were poor, because actually that costs a lot of money. I think they're probably rich. A lot of these people are rich because rich people send their kids off to stuff like this, because these types of placements usually cost thousands of dollars. It's kind of like sending your kid to one of those Freemason, Greek letter Ivy League schools. But anyway, one of the kids in there was making rocket fuel, and so his parents sent him there because it was quote unquote dangerous. And he had told me about how during the whole religious thing, sounds like his parents, like, I don't know, had the spirit of religion or something, because they were always bouncing around mostly from pagan Roman Catholic to Islam, but he was almost talked into what is it called, doing some type of bombing type thing by somebody, but then he ended up not doing it because he didn't like the idea of it and was like waking up to what was actually going on. And then the people who went and did I think it was suicide bombing, actually. I don't know if I can say that on here either. But from what I remember, they ended up dying, and the thing was on the news or something. And yeah, he had a lot of cognitive dissonance. He would go back and forth about whether his family actually did that stuff to him or not. He also told me that his cousins were Nazis, but then he said he was joking. I don't really know about that. He was saying that they probably wouldn't like me or something. That's kind of irrelevant though, but that's still pretty questionable, especially with all the other stuff his family was into. But yeah, he would like be trafficked to different places, and like he told me about this one time where he went back to where he spent some of his early childhood in, which was Romania, and how he would just have to do these weird jobs all the time that sometimes revolved around sexual abuse. And I don't even know what else to say. He went through a lot of stuff. And I only got to hear a little bit from him because I was only in Job Corps for 2 weeks before I got kicked out after that whole bullcrap with the doctor who sexually assaulted me, him, and somebody else. And then there was a lot of other mess that happened. Job Corps was honestly, it wasn't worth it. But of course, I ended up getting kicked out for a reason, because it wasn't where I was supposed to be. And I had somewhere else I was supposed to be in that season of my life, which wasn't Job Corps. And also Job Corps is like being in jail. Oh yeah, I remember what else I wanted to say, because this reminds me of that. He said that he didn't really notice what was really that bad about Job Corps because he was so used to like being in institutionalized living where you're not allowed to go anywhere or do anything or have a say so. And like I said, he was 18 at the time, but the thing about Job Corps is that even if you're 18 plus, you're not allowed to go anywhere or do anything. You can't even, well, actually, they don't even call it home visits. They call it paid time off, which is absurd because Job Corps, sometimes they really don't pay you, but they're supposed to, but they say that they only pay you like $20 every like 3 months or 3 weeks or something like that. I never ended up getting paid, but I mean, I was only there for 2 weeks, so I guess that's why. Oh yeah, but the other thing, he told me that he was just gonna try to like go back into the military because that's all he knows. Because what I forgot to kind of talk about more is that he was in a military family. So at one point he like lived on Lookout Mountain on the military base with his dad and whoever else. And yeah, so there's a lot of messed up stories out there about military families, but this was probably one of the most traumatic ones I've heard. But I guess it's also because of other stuff that was tied into it other than just the fact that he was in a military family. But yeah, he said that he was just going to go into the military because that life is all he knows. And all he knows is the military. And it reminds him of being in military school, which he claims was the best part of his life. But I know that there's like a lot of traumatic stuff he told me about that. Even some stuff that I really can't remember, but I know was like a lot other than just that sleeping on the floor thing with no blankets. And then there was, can't really remember what else. And that's the thing. Most people would just try to like say that he's lying or he's just mentally ill, even though mental illness comes from trauma, which is always the funniest thing about when people even do the like mentally ill, mental label cover up thing to drag an abuse victim around, because if it wasn't for the trauma, the person couldn't be mentally ill anyway. Just like how sex traffickers use the mentally ill labels on their victims. So like people that are born into it, where their abusers or their family, and they're born into these certain bloodlines that of Europeans that run around Northeast Africa that nobody can talk about, and even just the people that are kidnapped into it, and the traffickers make fake vital records or what was the other thing? Then the people that get in through CPS, so then CPS has their actual birth certificate and stuff. And so then the traffickers can take them to mental health professionals and get them diagnosed with schizophrenia, and then say that they're having schizophrenic delusions, that they're being sex trafficked, whatever in the world that really even means. And like I said before, it seems like people just think that mental illness is just when somebody runs around lying about stuff all the time. So basically, they see it as just being a liar. Because, like, how do you even have delusions about being sex trafficked? What is this? Is that even really a thing? But yeah, so I guess I'll title this The Boy Who Was Trafficked by the Military. I don't even know. There's so much more I could get into detail about. I'll probably make a part 2 because this is already really long.